Michael, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks a lot. Nice to meet you.
We're natural adversaries. You're a Navy guy, I'm an Army guy, but we're able to unite on AI. And for me, this is really free consulting, right? You run a company now called Practical AI, where you bring in executives and you spin them up on a rapidly changing pace of technology. So talk to us about what happens in these sessions, where the executives are at and where they end. What's the really unlock for them to understand the power of this technology revolution that we're in?
So every company is asking themselves, what does AI mean for my company, right? What do I need to do with it? How do I cut through all the hype that's out there and figure out what's the right move for my company? And I say every company, it's not really true. There are still, believe it or not, plenty of companies that are just adopting a wait and see attitude. They just feel like, they heard the first AI hype wave, about 10 years ago, and it didn't really necessarily change their world, like if they're in accounting or something. And so they're a little jaded or a little skeptical. But that's a minority. Most companies are like, okay, we can't ignore this. There's too much change that's happening. They see the examples of companies like Moderna. If you saw the news about them working with OpenAI. So there's a spectrum, and Moderna is an example of a company that's all in, right? They've unlocked, and pushed it down from the top to everyone in their company. Everyone has the power to create custom GPTs and things like that. On the other end is wait and see. I go in companies that are in the middle, and a lot of them still don't understand AI well enough to even figure out the AI strategy. And so I go in and do some executive education, give them the foundation knowledge that they need so they can ask the right questions and start to develop a good strategy for them, whatever it might be. Somewhere on that spectrum, but not wait and see. Anywhere else is okay.
And ultimately, these executives, they must be coming at you and saying, like, we want financial results, right? Like that's ultimately what they're trying to get. And how are you able to bridge the gap between here's what the technology can do and here's where you're going to ultimately be able to report to the street in 6, 12, or 18 months?
Right. So you're absolutely correct, right? They're all running a company that's driven by profits. And so they want things that are either going to grow the top line or reduce costs. And so it breaks into 3 buckets. One is individual productivity. Right? What does it mean now that almost for free, every single person in your company can essentially have an executive assistant, which normally only the top people have executive assistants, a chief of staff, which is a different function, helps with scheduling and things like that, brainstorming assistant, all of these things that used to be too expensive for most people, now everyone can have. So individual productivity, sort of question number 1. The second thing is internal business processes, whether it's hiring or accounting or any of the processes that the company has to do to run their business. Can AI, and mostly it's Gen AI, somehow make those processes more effective? And that's usually ROI for cost reduction. So that's bucket number 2. And then the third thing is, can you use generative AI or other kinds of AI for a new business or a new product or service that we can bring to market? So is there something that we now can do and sort of a new source of revenue, more of a top line growth that we could never do before?
And I feel like, bucket 1, we can all feel, right? We're using GPT, right? Ourselves. Bucket 2, it sort of logically makes sense. Like, great, I can map a business's workflow or operations. How do you navigate through bucket 3, which is we're going to create something new in the world because you have differentiated data and distribution that otherwise wouldn't be possible? There's so much sort of white space in thinking through that problem.
Yes, and just to be really humble and clear, I give them the tools they need to really sort of go to figure that out, right? I don't pretend to go in and sort of say, oh, I will figure that out. I will work with you. And when we're done working together, you're going to have a whole new business line. I don't start. The consultant's got to stop somewhere, But in order for them, so they know their business really well. And they know their industry well, and the competition and all the forces that drive their industry and their business. Once they understand what AI can do, what's now called traditional AI or generative AI, what the different kinds of AI can do, then they can connect the dots and start to ideate about new potential businesses. So I give them examples of other companies that might have done something like that, and hopefully spark their, brainstorming that leads to them doing something that they couldn't do before. An example with traditional AI is, if they haven't done this already, and obviously this isn't the new stuff, but once they understand that you can use proprietary data that no other company has to train a model, it can make predictions, it can answer some business questions. Sometimes they look at that and say that the results of that model is an application or a product or a service that we can bring to market. It's not helping us, beat our competition, so we might as well sell it to everybody type of thing. So that's one way that it happens.
Yeah, we're getting that all the time, right? We are this sort of de facto AI experts for people in the Harvard network. They sort of come to us, and it's almost gut wrenching for them to realize like everything that they've been doing might be inverted, and every single piece of software that they've built, they may need to rethink the way they're doing these jobs to be done. And how do you get these executives to stomach the fact that the next 12 to 24 months it's going to look and feel a lot different than they were just thinking it was going to feel?
Well, I mean, some of them, again, are very skeptical about how fast things are going to change. But, I mean, to be fair, most of these CEOs or C-level people, they've dealt with major dislocations in their industry that can be driven by other things, right? So your question is a great one, which is, you said, how do they stomach and wrap their head around the fact how fast things are changing with technology, with Gen AI? Well, some of them lived through the financial crisis, right? And they've lived through
that was rapid. That was
right.
That happened faster than we thought. Yeah.
So they've gone through other sort of like earthquake dislocations, and they've had to work their way through it. So I'm trying to think of the right term used. How do they stomach it? They've seen some stuff before. They sort of have like thick skin. Okay, here comes another thing that's going to potentially disrupt our industry, and we're going to have to react kind of quickly. It's last time it wasn't tech, this time it's tech, but they sort of have a little muscle memory from something else that's, if they've been doing it for a while.
They're professional change management, if you will. Well, across these industries, what do you think is going to be the largest change that we see? If there's any industry, whether it's finance, insurance, real estate, pure tech, what do you think Gen AI is going to drive the biggest change in the next 5 years?
Well, because you say 5 years? Yeah. So I have a great answer for that, which is I have no idea. And anybody who sits here and tells you they think they know what things are going to be like. It was a trap.
You're a Navy guy, so I was trying to set you up.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I almost fell for it. I had to wait, did he say 5 years? I mean, even people like, Jan LeCun can't predict where things are going to be in 5 years. It just is moving too fast. But in the near future, in the next couple of years anyhow, because LLMs are so far ahead of some of the other modalities, the other types of Gen AI, anybody who works, and most of what they work with all day is text, whether you're an attorney or anything else, if you're a language marketing person, for instance, marketing communications, if most of what you do has to do with good written communication skills and things like that, that's where things are changing the fastest. Right? The next thing I hesitate to predict. I mean, we were just here today with will.i.am. And so
pretty cool, right?
I've seen him speak before, not in person.
I thought you were gonna say you've seen him perform before.
No. But I was the expectations were high, and he was. It was impressive. The guy really has. And his ties to MIT are amazing. He really was inspired by something that happened in 2006 here on campus, sort of by accident. So in any case, the ability to generate video, voice. We saw an amazing demonstration of 2 AI avatars, talking to each other, historical figures from physics, things like that. So the ability to generate not just text, which we already talked about, but other modalities, I think is nobody can predict where that's going to go. if our kids will be learning physics from Isaac Newton, an avatar of Isaac Newton that's been trained on to answer questions the way he would have.
Yeah.
Who knows? Right?
Or an avatar of Will I Am, we hope,
Right.
That would be really optimal. So interesting. And like, if we can just circle back to this experience with practical AI, because I think these conversations happening oftentimes in private across boardrooms, across all of these executives, where they're trying to understand, like, how can I explain this massive change in budget to my board, who might not be as educated as I am, right? These boards are, by nature risk averse, right? They're trying to just maintain, you never got fired for buying IBM, right? Back in the day until you did. And so, like, how are these executives navigating the boardroom with sort of like this new information that you're providing them?
Yeah, it's interesting because that dynamic is definitely there. There are more forward-looking CEOs who have a board that's sort of not as forward-looking.
Yeah.
I've also heard from it the other way around, where the board, without even really understanding AI, but just hearing about everything that's going on, is telling the CEO, hey, you need to spend at least 10% of your R&D budget on generative AI.
Right.
And then the CEO says to me, yeah, and they don't even know what generative AI is. So one solution is actually for practical AI. I don't want to, promote myself, but to go into the board, right? It's not just for the C-Suite, but educate boards. And they want that too, right? They want to understand it so they can provide better advice, but also better governance, right? Because AI, like any powerful technology, can really help your company move forward, but it can also get your company in trouble. And boards are frequently, as you just said, trying to make sure the latter doesn't occur. They want both to occur, but governance is sort of like, right. It's important.
As long as their incentive structure is, of course, is quite different. And so we'll land here on the board and the executive, and ultimately the outcome of what you're doing with these folks is an AI strategy, right? What do these actually look like, right? Like, how much of it is, hey, net new software? How much of it is tool adoption? Like walk us through like AI strategy. Like, what does that mean?
So again, I think there's if, when, and how for a strategy. And actually, as an HBS graduate, you probably have done more business strategy in a lot of ways.
I'm still trying to figure it out. It seems like everyone's got a different answer, so I'm searching.
So, as I said in the beginning of our chat, there should be no if, right? That it's not an if my company needs to do something with generative AI. It's just a matter of when, where, and how. So after you understand what it can do, you might decide not to do anything right away. That's okay. You might say, we're going to wait until this area over here proceeds, and we're going to keep our finger on it and on what's proceeding there. They usually decide to start doing some experiments and proof of concept. So they'll pick in either the individual productivity area that we talked about, or an internal business process, usually one of those two, or both. And they'll say, okay, based on what we understand, where are we going to try this first? Where's the most potential bang for the buck? And then I encourage them to experiment. It's so cheap to experiment with this as opposed with Gen AI.
1 quarter, 2 quarter. What's really an experiment for these enterprises? A week?
It's usually, I don't know if there's a typical, I don't have a ton of data. I mean, to be candid, I've only been doing this for a matter of months myself. So I don't have a year's
The demand's never been higher for what you're offering. Like, it's unbelievable.
It is. I just kept talking to people who kept saying, how do I understand AI? Where can I learn it?
Eventually, I gotta stop doing this for free,
Right. Right. Well, I would send them to, some really good online classes. But you have to spend about at least 10 hours, and they don't have 10 hours. It's also, it's not customized for them and their industry.
Totally.
And they can't ask any questions. So those are the 3 advantages of doing it in person, right? Is I go in and customize things based on the client and the industry. So if it's a legal firm, I'll give examples from other law firms. And if it's I talk to a company that does student loans, I make it custom. And then, of course, they can ask questions. So it's just a much better and condensed experience for them. And I'm just a lot less expensive than McKinsey or, BCG.
Yeah. It's not that hard to get over that threshold. So,
Wow.
but that's where all my classmates are still doing.
Right.
So good on them. Last question. Do you think in the next 10 years there's going to be a one-person billion-dollar company?
The one-person billion-dollar bet. Sam Altman he said that he has a chat group of a bunch of people like him, and they have a bet going about.
I'm not in that one, so I'm trying to make my own.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not in that one either.
A smaller bet number.
So look, how many guys did it take? And I use guys without gender. People did it take to build Snapchat that they sold to Facebook for over $1 billion? Wasn't it? Like, it was a really small number of people. I thought
WhatsApp was really small. WhatsApp was
maybe there's WhatsApp that I'm thinking of.
40 folks.
So there's already been companies, billion-dollar companies, where it was less than 100 people, less than 50 people.
Yeah. So
and now with Gen AI, you could absolutely see that someday there could be one. Certainly, I would say I'll make a bet that within the next year, you'll see one that's less than 10 people.
Next year within 10 people.
And what the hell? In 5 years, there'll be one with just one person.
All right. Well, we'll bet.
I just broke my own rule.
We'll bet Army Navy tickets on it. And
okay.
that way we know. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks a lot.